there are questions that do not come to us in daylight, not in the middle of tasks or conversations or the ordinary forward movement of hours. They come later, in the quietest rooms, at the thinnest edge of awareness, when the body has finally released its grip on the day, and the mind, no longer required to manage the immediate and the urgent, begins, almost without meaning to reach toward something older and larger than anything the day contained. Tonight, that question is one of the oldest and most beautiful that our species has ever asked. It has been written into the architecture of every observatory ever built, into the long patience of radio dishes turned toward the sky in the middle of the night, into the golden records we sent outward on spacecraft now so far from Earth that the word distance no longer adequately describes where they are. It lives in the marrow of physics and in the deepest grammar of mythology, and in that particular quality of feeling that arrives when you stand under a clear sky on a night when the stars are sharp and impossibly numerous, and you notice, almost involuntarily, that the question forming in you is the same question that has formed in every human being who has ever stood in that same darkness and looked up. Where is everybody? You are listening to Midnight Sleep Chronicles, and tonight our archives open around a silence. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of a question so vast and so beautiful that it has never been fully answered and may never be, and carries in that very unanswerable quality something that is, when you allow yourself to feel it fully, closer to wonder than to fear. This is a journey through the mathematics of the cosmos and the whispers of ancient story, through the cold patience of radio telescopes and the warm persistence of human longing, toward something that feels, at its deepest level, like an embrace. Let your body settle now. Let the weight of you find its rest in whatever surface is holding you tonight. There is nothing required of you in the hours ahead except the quiet willingness to be present, to breathe, and to follow this thread together, out into the dark, toward the stars that have been waiting for this question since long before there were any creatures on this particular blue world capable of asking it. If something in these words touches a question you yourself have carried, a wordless reaching toward that has come to you in the in-between hours, you are in the right place. You have always been in the right place. And if you would like to share that feeling in the comments below this video, I would be genuinely honored to read it. We begin. In the summer of 1950, in the high desert of New Mexico, at a research facility that had just 5 years before produced the most destructive weapon in human history, a group of physicists were eating lunch together. The conversation had been ranging freely across subjects: recent newspaper reports of unidentified flying objects, the comic absurdity of a cartoon showing aliens stealing trash cans from New York City. When one of the men at the table, a compact Italian physicist with a reputation for asking the sort of questions that seemed simple but contained entire universities of implication, set down his fork and said quite quietly, "Where is everybody?" Enrico Fermi, the man who had built the first nuclear reactor in a squash court beneath the stands of a football stadium, the man who could calculate the approximate number of piano tuners in Chicago in his head from first principles, faster than most people could find the answer in a phone book, the man who, at that lunch table in the summer of 1950, performed a back-of-the-envelope calculation and arrived at a conclusion that has not stopped troubling the people who think about it ever since. The calculation was not, at its core, complicated. Begin with the Milky Way galaxy, a spiral of stars so numerous that if you were to count them at the rate of 1 per second, without pause, without sleep, it would take you more than 3,000 years to finish. Between 100 billion and 400 billion stars. the overwhelming majority of them older than our sun, many of them surrounded by worlds of their own. Then consider the age of the galaxy, 13 billion years. And then consider what it would mean for a civilization to have a head start of even 1 million years. A span of time that sounds enormous by human measure, but represents, against the backdrop of the galaxy's age, less than 1/10,000th of its history. A civilization with a million-year head start, traveling at even a small fraction of the speed of light, would have had time to touch every star in the galaxy many times over. To send probes, to build structures visible from neighboring star systems, to leave, across the vast canvas of the Milky Way, marks as unmistakable as a signature in fresh concrete. And yet, and this is the heart of the paradox, when we look at that canvas, we find nothing. No marks, no structures, no signals that cannot be explained by the indifferent physics of dead matter. The stars shine with mathematical reliability, and they do not speak. We are here on this improbable living world, pressing our ears to the cosmos, and as far as we can determine, we are utterly, completely, astonishingly alone. This is the paradox that carries Fermi's name. And the question, when you hold it long enough, stops being merely a puzzle for physicists and astronomers. It becomes something more personal. A question about what kind of universe we live in. About whether the silence around us is the silence of a cosmos that has not yet woken to itself, or the silence of a cosmos that has tried over and over to produce something capable of lasting, and each time has not quite managed it. Stay with the question. Let it open rather than close. The best questions always do. 11 years after that lunch in Los Alamos, in the autumn of 1961, a young astronomer named Frank Drake stood before a small and remarkable gathering at the National Radio Astronomy Observatory in Greenbank, West Virginia. He had assembled 11 scientists for what would become the first formal meeting devoted entirely to the question of whether intelligence existed elsewhere in the cosmos. Among them was a 27-year-old Carl Sagan, already extraordinary, already carrying in his particular combination of scientific rigor and poetic vision the seeds of everything he would eventually become. Drake needed a way to organize the conversation. He needed to break the immensity of the question into components that could be examined, estimated, argued over with numbers. So he wrote an equation on a blackboard. 7 terms multiplied together, yielding a single number he called n, the estimated number of civilizations in the Milky Way currently capable of communicating with us. It is now known as the Drake equation, and it has been described as the second most famous equation in science, after the one that relates energy and mass and the speed of light. The terms of Drake's equation move through the history of a communicating civilization like chapters in a story. The rate at which new stars are born in the galaxy, the fraction of those stars orbited by planets, the average number of planets per solar system where conditions could support life, the fraction of such worlds on which life actually arises, the fraction of life-bearing worlds where intelligence develops, the fraction of intelligent civilizations that develop the technology to send signals into space. And finally, the most uncertain and perhaps most important term of all, how long, on average, such a civilization survives as a communicating entity before it goes silent. At the time Drake wrote his equation, most of these terms were almost entirely unknown. But 6 decades of science have transformed the picture. The Kepler Space Telescope, launched in 2009 and dedicated entirely to the search for planets around other stars, returned data that reshaped our understanding so completely that astronomers still speak of the period before Kepler and the period after it as if they were different eras of knowing. What Kepler confirmed is something that, when you encounter it fully, is almost too large to hold in ordinary thought. Virtually every star in the Milky Way is orbited by planets. Not 10% of stars, not 50. Something approaching certainty. Every point of light in the night sky conceals, behind its apparent solitude, a hidden system of worlds. The numbers that follow are staggering in their scale. There are approximately 40 billion planets in the habitable zones of their stars in the Milky Way alone. In the region where temperatures are mild enough for liquid water to exist on a rocky surface. 11 billion of those planets orbit stars similar in size and temperature to our own sun. And beyond our galaxy, in the observable universe, there are approximately 2 trillion galaxies, each containing hundreds of billions of stars. The mathematics does not whisper, it shouts. The universe should be full of voices, and yet. On the 15th of August, 1977, late at night while most of Ohio slept, a radio telescope at Ohio State University detected something that did not fit the pattern of everything it had heard before. The telescope was called Big Ear. It had been listening to the sky for years as part of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, scanning the frequencies where theorists had long argued an advanced civilization would most naturally choose to broadcast. Frequencies related to the resonance of hydrogen, the most abundant element in the universe. The frequencies that any civilization with a radio telescope would know to monitor. Night after night, year after year, Big Ear had returned nothing but the familiar static of the cosmos. On the 15th of August, something was different. A strong narrowband signal arrived at exactly 1,420 megahertz, the frequency at which neutral hydrogen resonates throughout the universe, the frequency that SETI theorists had designated as the most likely carrier of an intentional interstellar transmission. The signal's intensity was extraordinary. It was coherent, and it lasted exactly 72 seconds. Precisely as long as the rotation of the Earth allowed Big Ear to observe a single fixed point in the sky. Days later, a volunteer astronomer named Jerry Eman was sorting through the printed records of the telescope's observations when he encountered the anomaly in the data. He stared at the numbers, he picked up a red pen, and he wrote in the margin of the paper one word: wow. In the nearly 50 years since that night in Ohio, the signal has never recurred. Every attempt to find it again, and there have been many, using instruments vastly more sensitive than Big Ear, has returned only silence. The most recent research, published in 2024, suggests a possible natural explanation. A magnetar, perhaps, a neutron star with an extraordinarily powerful magnetic field, briefly bombarding a cold cloud of interstellar hydrogen, causing it to flare suddenly in radio waves at exactly the frequency Big Ear was monitoring. Perhaps. The researchers themselves are careful to say that the case remains open. And so, 72 seconds of data recorded on a summer night in Ohio remain, nearly half a century later, among the most discussed and least explained events in the history of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. 72 seconds. Oh, minute and 12 seconds. The time it takes to walk, at a moderate pace, the length of a city block. The time it takes to make a cup of tea. In 72 seconds, something came through the sky and reached a dish pointed at the stars. And a man wrote, wow. And then it was gone. And everything since then has been the long, patient, beautiful silence of listening for it again. Let this settle into you as you settle into this comfortable dark. The question is real. The silence is real. And both of them are. When you allow yourself to hold them together, without hurrying toward either despair or resolution, one of the most profound gifts the universe has left on our doorstep. Before there were equations and radio telescopes, before the concept of an exoplanet had been named, there were stories. And before the stories were written down, they moved through populations the way fire moves, carried not in cells, but in the architecture of memory, passed from voice to ear across the slow centuries, accumulating the weight of repetition until they became a kind of truth that no single telling could contain. But let us begin, for now, with the science, and let it carry us, as science sometimes does when followed with sufficient patience, back into the territory where the equations begin to rhyme with the oldest stories. In 1998, an economist named Robin Hanson published an essay that began with a simple and unsettling observation. The universe appears to be dead, not quiet, not remote, not full of civilizations that have chosen silence, but dead, containing, as far as our most sensitive instruments can detect, no evidence of intelligence beyond this one small world. And this deadness, Hansen argued, is not a neutral fact. It is a statement about probability. It implies, with a logical force that is difficult to escape, the existence of what he called a great filter. The argument goes like this. Between the raw material of dead, matter, and the kind of civilization that would make itself visible across galactic distances, there must exist a series of developmental steps. The emergence of life from chemistry, the transition from simple cells to complex ones, the evolution of multicellular organisms, the development of intelligence, the invention of technology capable of reaching across the void between stars. Each of these steps must be, to some degree, improbable. Otherwise, the galaxy would be full of visible civilizations, and the sky would not be silent. But one of these steps, Hansen argued, must be improbable to a degree that makes it a genuine barrier, a filter through which the overwhelming majority of planetary histories never pass. Something that stops the process, that takes what the mathematics of the Drake equation suggests should produce millions of communicating civilizations and reduces it to the number we actually observe, which is one. The question, and this is where the concept takes on its peculiar quality of intellectual vertigo, is where in the developmental sequence the filter falls. Is it behind us or ahead? If the filter is behind us, if the improbable step was the emergence of life from chemistry, or the development of the first complex cell, or the particular combination of evolutionary pressures that produce general intelligence, then we are the survivors of an extraordinary improbability. The sky is silent because we are among the very few who made it this far. The silence is not a warning. It is a measure of our rarity. We are the unlikely winners, the statistical exceptions, the inheritors of a sequence of near impossibilities that somehow, against all the odds, succeeded. But if the filter is ahead of us, if the improbable step is not in our past, but in our future, then the silence carries a very different message. It means that the civilizations which came before us, the ones that developed technology and looked at the stars with something like our own longing, did not survive what comes next. Something stopped them. The filter consumed them. And the sky is silent because their voices were stopped before they became loud enough to cross the distances between stars. Hansen's formulation has a quality that the mind keeps returning to, because it makes every piece of good news about life in the universe simultaneously a piece of bad news about our own prospects. Every new discovery of organic chemistry in interstellar space, every confirmed detection of a planet in a habitable zone. Each is, in the logic of the great filter, evidence that the filter is not in the past, evidence that what stopped every civilization before us is still waiting, still ahead. And yet, and this is where the thought transforms, if you are willing to stay with the discomfort long enough. The great filter is not a prediction. It is a framework for thinking about probability. And probability says nothing definitive about this particular civilization, on this particular night, carrying this particular question. We are here. The question is open, and an open question is always a doorway, not a wall. There is another answer to the silence. It is at once more frightening in its logic and, strangely, more intimate in what it implies, because it explains the quiet sky not through catastrophe, but through choice. A Chinese novelist named Liu Cixin, writing in 2008, proposed what has come to be called the dark forest hypothesis. The universe, he wrote, is a dark forest. Every civilization within it is an armed hunter, moving through the trees with perfect silence. The hunter knows there are other hunters in the same forest. The hunter can hear, sometimes, the distant sounds that suggest other presences. The faint electromagnetic fingerprint of a technological civilization. The deliberate pattern in a radio signal that cannot be explained by physics alone. And the hunter knows, with a logic that admits no sentiment, that the rational response to those sounds is not curiosity, not communication, not the reaching out that the word contact implies. The rational response is elimination. Liu built his argument from axioms. First, survival is the primary need of any civilization. Second, civilization continuously expands and requires resources, and the total matter in the universe is finite. From these premises, he derived a conclusion as cold and clean as a mathematical proof. You cannot know the intentions of another civilization. You cannot know whether they are peaceful or aggressive, whether their technology matches yours or dwarfs it, whether they would respond to your signal with welcome or with a weapon. You know only that they exist. And in a universe where resources are finite and intentions are permanently unknowable, the only rational strategy is silence. This, Liu argued, is why the forest is dark. Not because there is nothing in it, because everything in it has learned, through the long and unsentimental education of survival across astronomical time, to move without sound. The civilizations that announce themselves, that broadcast their location, that sent deliberate signals into the dark in the hope of contact, were found and silenced. The ones that remain are the ones that understood the stakes and chose the only strategy compatible with continued existence: invisibility. And then there is humanity, broadcasting for a century, leaking radio and television signals into space in an expanding bubble that now extends roughly 100 light-years in every direction from the Earth. Deliberately transmitting in 1974, the Arecibo message, aimed at a globular cluster 25,000 light-years away. Sending the golden records on the Voyagers in 1977, carrying our music and our mathematics and our location directly labeled to any finder. In the dark forest, we have been making noise. And yet, here is the turn that changes this story into something other than a warning. We keep sending. Something in our nature refuses the cold logic of perpetual concealment. Something in the particular quality of consciousness that has emerged on this world insists on the reaching out, even in the face of uncertainty about what might reach back. The golden records are not, whatever the dark forest hypothesis might suggest about their tactical wisdom, a mistake. They are a statement about what we are. A species that, given the choice between hiding and speaking, chose to speak. that chose, even against the mathematics of risk, to say, "We are here, and here is what we love, and this is our gift to the dark." There is something in that choice that deserves to be held, in this quiet room, in the comfortable dark, as more than courage, as a form of love. And now the science begins, as it sometimes does when you follow it deep enough, to dissolve at its edges into something older, into the territory where the laboratory and the archive meet, where the data begins to rhyme with stories that are thousands of years old, where the absence in the radio frequencies echoes with absences that ancient traditions have always described and always mourned. Every major civilization that has left a written record has also left, preserved within that record, the memory of a time when things were different, when the relationship between the human and the cosmic was closer, more immediate, less separated by the distance that now seems so absolute. The Greek poet Hesiod described a golden age, a time before labor, before the grinding necessity of extracting survival from a reluctant earth, when the gods moved among human beings as companions and the land offered everything freely. The Vedic tradition of ancient India preserved the Satya Yuga, the truth age, in which the principle of cosmic order was whole and undamaged, in which the divine and the human were not yet strangers to each other. The Egyptian concept of Zep Tepi, the first time, described a foundational era when the gods walked the earth and the world was in its original and perfect form, before the long decline that all of recorded history represents. The task of the pharaoh, the purpose of the entire elaborate ritual machinery of Egyptian civilization, was to maintain connection with Zep Tepi, to keep the thread from breaking, to prevent the world from drifting too far from its original aliveness. The Sumerian king lists, among the oldest written texts in human history, describe the rulers of the earliest times as reigning for thousands of years, not as a literal claim about biology, but as an attempt to encode in numerical form the immensity of a before that ordinary chronology could not contain. The Yoruba tradition of West Africa, the Aboriginal, Australian concept of the dream time, the mythologies of ancient Mesoamerica, and the oldest narratives of the Pacific Islands. All of them contain, in their various vocabularies, the same structural memory, that the universe was once different, that it was once more generous, more alive, more in communication with what the living body recognizes as home, that something changed, and that the memory of the better world persists, carried in the stories the way a recessive gene persists in a population. Not always visible, but always present, always capable of expressing itself when the conditions are right. These are not literal memories of extraterrestrial contact. The mythological traditions of ancient civilizations are not transcripts of alien encounters. But they are something. They are the shape that a particular kind of longing takes when it has been alive long enough to become structural. They are the form in which the question, "Where is everybody?" exists before the radio telescope and the Drake equation give it a scientific vocabulary. They are the universe's silence, translated into the language of the heart. And that translation, when you allow yourself to hear it, sounds less like grief than like a conversation that has been paused for a very long time, waiting patiently for the conditions to resume. We have come a long way together through this night, through the lunch table in New Mexico and the radio telescope in Ohio, through the cold precision of the great filter and the dark clarity of the dark forest, through the golden age myths that every human culture has preserved without ever being told to, and the improbable precision of the physical constants that make complexity possible at all. Now we arrive at the question beneath all the other questions. the one that has been present since the beginning of this journey, patient and persistent as starlight. What does the silence mean for us? Not for the species, not for the physics, but for us, lying here in the dark, breathing, holding all of this. There is a possibility that has been waiting at the edge of everything we have discussed, and it is the one that transforms the texture of everything that came before it. We may be among the first. The universe is 13.8 billion years old. The Milky Way galaxy is 13 billion years old. Our sun is 4.5 billion years old. Complex multicellular life on Earth has existed for perhaps 600 million years. Our genus has existed for perhaps 3 million years. Anatomically modern humans for perhaps 300,000. And our technological civilization, the kind capable of radio communication, of building telescopes, of asking the question that Fermi asked over lunch in the summer of 1950, has existed for, at most, 100 years. 100 years out of 13 billion is, in cosmic terms, a rounding error. If the history of the Milky Way were compressed into a single calendar year, our civilization would have existed for less than a millisecond at the very end of the last second of December 31st. We are not just young in the ordinary sense. We are cosmically newborn. We are a species that has barely learned to speak in cosmic terms, asking whether anyone else is speaking. The conditions that produced us are not unique to this world or this moment. They are the kind of conditions that the universe, in its patient way, produces wherever and whenever the parameters align. Other worlds are assembling their complexity right now. Other evolutionary experiments are running. Other nervous systems, different from ours in their chemistry but perhaps not in their essential reaching toward quality, may be developing the capacity for wonder at this very moment. In solar systems we cannot yet see, on timescales we cannot yet imagine. We may not be alone. We may simply be early. The galaxy's conversation may not yet have begun in earnest. And we may be among the first voices to arrive at the table, looking around at empty chairs, mistaking the emptiness of the early morning for the permanent silence of an abandoned room. There is a loneliness in being first. But there is also something else, the sense that a beginning carries within it the fullness of everything that will follow. That the first note of a symphony already contains the entire symphony, compressed and waiting. We are in the first note. The astronomer Carl Sagan spent his professional life holding both sides of the silence simultaneously. The improbability of our existence and the mathematical suggestion of other existences. The loneliness implied by the quiet sky and the richness implied by the mathematics of the habitable universe. And he arrived. Through decades of thinking about the cosmos at its largest and smallest scales, at a formulation so simple and so strange that it has the quality of something that was always true, waiting to be said. We are a way for the cosmos to know itself. The atoms in your body were forged in the cores of stars that exploded billions of years before the Earth existed. The calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, the oxygen in every breath you take. All of it produced by the nuclear furnaces of ancient suns, scattered through the galaxy by supernovae, slowly gathered by gravity over billions of years into the rocky planet that became your home. You are made of the deaths of stars, and you are also, and this is the part that still carries a charge no matter how many times you encounter it, the part of the universe that can look at stars and wonder about them. The part of the universe that can ask where it came from and reach toward that question with something that can only be called love. If we are alone, if the great filter is behind us, if the emergence of consciousness was the improbable step, and we are, in fact, the singular inheritors of that improbability in this galaxy, then every act of wonder is cosmically significant in a way that is almost too large to hold. Every human being who has ever looked up at the night sky and felt that reaching quality of genuine awe has been the universe noticing itself. The stars do not know they are beautiful. The galaxies do not know they are vast. The extraordinary precision of the physical constants that made complexity possible does not know it is extraordinary. Only we know. Only the strange, late-arriving, fragile capacity of consciousness allows any of this to be held, contemplated, found beautiful, mourned when it passes. You are, at this moment, the universe's instrument for self-knowledge. The particular configuration of atoms and electricity and information that is lying here in the dark, breathing, holding the question of its own aloneness. This configuration is what the cosmos has built. Across 13 billion years of patient elaboration, to look back at itself and find it good. That is not loneliness. That is, if you turn it the right way in the light of your attention, something closer to a calling. In 1977, the same year that 72 seconds of ambiguous signal came through a radio telescope in Ohio, 2 spacecraft left the Earth on trajectories that would carry them beyond the solar system forever. Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. Each of them carries, bolted to its frame, a golden phonograph record, 12 inches in diameter, gold-plated copper, designed to survive intact for 1 billion years in the cold vacuum of interstellar space. The records were assembled under the supervision of Carl Sagan. They contain the sounds of Earth, wind, rain, surf against a shore, the crack of thunder in a summer storm, the calls of humpback whales, the song of a bird in a tree that may no longer exist, the sound of a rocket launching and a baby crying in the first moments after birth. They contain music, Bach and Beethoven and Louis Armstrong, Peruvian panpipes and a Senegalese percussionist, and Chuck Berry, a Georgian choral piece and a Navajo night chant, and Blind Willie Johnson singing, "Dark was the night, cold was the ground," in a voice that has been described as one of the most lonely sounds ever recorded by a human being. They contain greetings in 55 human languages. They contain 116 images. The structure of DNA, the anatomy of a human being, photographs of the Earth from space, a woman eating an apple, a family gathered around a table, children playing. They contain, in essence, us. Voyager 1 is now, at the time of this telling, more than 23 billion kilometers from Earth, more distant from its origin than any human-made object in history. It moves through interstellar space, beyond the heliopause, beyond the protective bubble of the sun's influence, in a region of the galaxy that no human technology had ever reached before it arrived. It still transmits signals back to Earth, faint as a whisper across that incomprehensible distance. And the engineers who receive them, each time, with what one can only imagine, is a mixture of professional satisfaction and genuine wonder. Still hear that it is there, still moving, still carrying its golden record through the dark. The record will outlast the civilization that made it. It will outlast the language in which its contents were encoded, and the species whose music fills its grooves, and the solar system whose third planet it came from. In 40,000 years, will make its closest approach to another star. In a few billion years, if it survives, it will still be traveling through a galaxy that may look very different from the one it left, carrying the music of a species that lived for a little while on a rocky world in an unremarkable spiral arm, and found the universe beautiful, enough to press into gold. We sent that record knowing it would almost certainly never be found. The odds of any civilization ever intercepting an object so small, moving through a volume so vast, are essentially indistinguishable from zero. We sent it anyway. We pressed our music into gold and bolted it to a machine and launched it into the permanent dark. Because the alternative, staying silent, staying hidden, treating the silence as the final word, was not something our nature would permit. The golden record is humanity's most complete answer to the silence of the sky. It is an act of faith so large that faith is almost too small a word for it. It is love, sent outward into the unknown at 61,000 kilometers per hour, without expectation of return. There is a concept in physics called resonance, the phenomenon by which a system vibrates with greater amplitude when exposed to a frequency that matches its own natural frequency. Strike a tuning fork and hold it near a crystal glass, and the glass begins, slowly, to hum in answer. Not because the sound has forced it, but because the vibration in the air matches what the glass is already, in its molecular structure, waiting for. The match is not coincidence. It is the physics of recognition between similar things. The question of whether we are alone in the universe operates, for the people who hold it long enough, something like a tuning fork. It strikes something that was already vibrating, something in the architecture of the human nervous system, in the particular quality of consciousness that has emerged on this world, that has always been oriented, at some level too fundamental for ordinary language, toward the possibility of contact, toward the idea that the universe might, somewhere in its vast dark, contain something that would look at us and know us. The longing for that recognition, the longing that keeps the SETI researchers listening year after year in the face of continued silence, that drove Sagan to fill a golden record with everything he could compress of human experience, that drives the amateur astronomer to stand in the cold of a clear night and give the stars their full and patient attention. This longing is not a form of naivety. It is not wishful thinking. It is one of the most accurate responses available to a conscious creature in a universe like ours. Because the universe that produced the longing is the same universe that produced the question. The atoms that make up your brain, the neurons that fire when you contemplate the silence of the sky and feel that ache of reaching toward, those atoms came from stars. And those stars came from the original expansion. And the original expansion was governed by the same physical constants whose extraordinary precision made complexity possible at all. You are not a small thing asking a question of a large, indifferent thing. You are a part of the art of large thing, the part that has developed, through some sequence of accidents and necessities we do not yet fully understand, the capacity to ask. The question comes from inside the universe. You are the universe wondering about itself, and wondering, in the oldest and truest sense of the word, is a form of love. The philosopher Blaise Pascal, writing in the 17th century in the knowledge that the new astronomy had revealed a universe incomparably larger than anything that came before, described the human being as a thinking reed, the most fragile thing in nature, crushable by a drop of water, and yet able to encompass the universe in thought. Even if the universe were to crush us, he wrote, we would still be more noble than what kills us, because we know that we are dying, and the universe knows nothing of the kind. The grandeur of the human being, in his account, lies not in size or power or permanence, but in knowledge, in the capacity to hold the scale of the cosmos in the mind, to feel the weight of the distances and the ages, to understand something of where we are and what surrounds us, and to continue, not in spite of that understanding, but because of it. To find life worth living and the universe worth examining. What Pascal could not have known, what required 3 centuries of physics and astronomy to reveal, is that the universe's apparent indifference is not the whole story. The physical constants that govern the cosmos are calibrated with a precision that makes complexity possible. The stars that forged our atoms did so in exactly the way required for chemistry to work. The planet that assembled from that stellar debris sits at exactly the distance from its sun required for water to remain liquid across geological time. The universe did not have to do any of this, and it did all of it. The physicist Freeman Dyson, one of the great minds of the 20th century, wrote near the end of his long life something that has stayed with everyone who encountered it. He wrote that the more he examined the universe and the details of its architecture, the more evidence he found that the universe must have known we were coming. He did not mean this mystically. He meant it as a physicist, as an observation about what the structure of physical law at every scale seems to permit and even to encourage. The universe is not neutral about complexity. It has, in the architecture of its fundamental laws, made complexity not merely possible, but likely. It has made us not merely possible, but, given enough time and the right conditions, nearly inevitable. The silence of the sky does not contradict this. If anything, it deepens it. Because the kind of universe that makes complexity inevitable across its vast extent may also be the kind of universe that takes billions of years to get there. That produces, in its patient and impersonal way, one conscious civilization at a time on a timescale so gradual that from the perspective of the newly arrived, the rest of the universe still looks empty, still looks quiet. We are in the pause before the answer. And in the pause, there is something present, something that the pause itself cannot contain, which is the quality of the question, alive in us, awake in us, beautiful in us, patient in us. There is a geometry to waiting that is different from the geometry of all other human activities. When you wait for something whose arrival you can predict, a train, a season, the return of a friend, the waiting has a shape defined by its expected end. But when you wait for something whose arrival cannot be predicted, or whose arrival may not come in any human lifetime, then the waiting itself becomes a different kind of activity. It becomes something more like a practice, a discipline, a choice made repeatedly, day after day, to remain oriented toward the question rather than closing it. The SETI researchers who have devoted their careers to listening for signals from other civilizations are, in this sense, engaged in one of the most philosophically interesting forms of labor in human history. They are not sustained by the kind of hope that is attached to specific expectations. The hope that says, if I do this, then that will happen, and the doing and the happening are separated by a predictable interval. They are sustained by something different, something closer to the quality of attention that a contemplative tradition cultivates than to the goal-directed focus we usually associate with science. They are sustained by the conviction that the question matters, that the act of listening, patient, persistent, technically rigorous, open to whatever might come, is itself valuable, regardless of what comes. That a universe in which someone is paying attention is a different kind of universe than one in which no such attention exists. The listening changes something, not in the sky, which remains indifferent to our instruments, but in us, in the species that built the instruments. The Welsh language has a word, hiraeth, that has no direct equivalent in English, and that every attempt to translate loses something essential in the losing. It means something in the neighborhood of longing, but not ordinary longing, not the longing for something specific that you once had and might regain. It is the longing for a home that either cannot be returned to, or that may never have existed in quite the form it is remembered. It carries within it the sorrow of a homesickness that cannot be resolved by any particular destination, because the home it yearns for is not located on any map you could point to. It is the feeling that arrives when a particular quality of light, a certain arrangement of landscape and silence, produces in you something that exceeds what the sensory data alone can account for. A recognition of something that is both intimately yours and impossibly far away. Hireth is the feeling that arrives when you contemplate the question of whether we are alone in the universe. It is the particular ache of looking at the night sky and feeling, in the looking, not merely wonder or curiosity, but something more personal. Something that feels like the memory of a connection that may never have existed in your lifetime or in your civilization's lifetime, but that the body recognizes anyway. The cosmic Hireth, the longing for a universe that is not silent, for a sky that speaks, for the confirmation that the reaching toward quality of the best human wonder has something real to reach toward, is not a failure of adjustment to reality. It is not a symptom of an inability to accept the universe as it is. It is one of the most accurate responses available to a conscious creature in a universe structured the way ours appears to be. A creature built for connection, living in a cosmos that has not yet, or not yet detectably, provided the specific form of connection it was built for. The Hireth is real. The longing is real. And both of them are, when you allow them to be fully felt rather than quickly translated into either hope or despair. One of the most exquisite aspects of conscious existence in a universe at this stage of its development. They are what it feels like to be awake and aware in a cosmos that is still becoming. To be among the first to arrive at the edge of a conversation that has not yet begun, and to stand there, patient and present and unwilling to close what the universe has left open. Consider what it means that the universe made you at all. Not you specifically, not the particular arrangement of memories and habits and preferences and fears that constitutes your individual identity, but the capacity for consciousness, the capacity for wonder, the capacity for the particular quality of attention that can hold the scale of the cosmos in one breath and the intimacy of a single heartbeat in the next. Consider that the universe, in producing this capacity, in arranging the physical constants and the stellar chemistry and the evolutionary pressures and the neurological architecture to produce something capable of asking where it came from, has done something that goes beyond what survival requires. Evolution does not need wonder. Evolution does not need the capacity to feel the beauty of a mathematical proof, or to be moved by music, or to look at the night sky and feel, in the looking, something that cannot be adequately described as data collection. And yet, here we are, full of all of these capacities, full of them in excess of what any straightforward adaptive account can explain. We do not merely survive. We find things beautiful. We compose symphonies and prove theorems and build radio telescopes and press music into gold and launch it into the dark. We do not merely, we live. We wonder. The universe did not have to make us like this. The laws of physics that permitted the emergence of life did not require that life develop the capacity for wonder or for love, or for the particular quality of longing that looks up at the stars and feels homesick for a connection that may never have existed. There are conceivable universes, consistent with the basic laws of nature, in which consciousness emerges without the richness that characterizes ours, without the aesthetic dimension, without the capacity for awe, without the reaching toward quality that has been the source of every great work of art and science and philosophy our species has produced. We are not in that universe. We are in a universe that, in producing consciousness, produced it in its most extravagant possible form. A universe that, when it finally arranged the conditions for awareness, made the awareness extraordinary. A universe that gave the thing that woke up in it not just the capacity to perceive, but the capacity to be moved by what it perceives. Not just the capacity to survive, but the capacity to find survival insufficient, to want more than survival, to reach toward beauty and connection and meaning in the great questions that have no answers. This excess, this generosity of the universe in the form it gave to consciousness, is one of the things that makes the silence of the sky feel less like abandonment and more like invitation. The universe made us capable of asking whether we are alone. It made us capable of feeling the weight of that question, of being changed by it, of carrying it through our lives as one of the things that defines what we are. And it made us capable of doing all of this without requiring an answer, without making the asking contingent on the arriving. It gave us the question as a gift, complete in itself, independent of its resolution. That is a particular kind of love. Not the conditional love that requires a response before it is real, but the unconditional love that gives without expectation of return. The kind of love that presses music into gold and launches it into the permanent dark, knowing it will almost certainly never be found. Giving it anyway, because the giving is what the love does when it has the opportunity to express itself fully. The universe gave us wonder. It gave us the capacity to hold the question. It gave us each other to hold it with. And it gave us the night sky, the particular beauty of all those points of light, each one a sun, each one surrounded by worlds, each one burning with the nuclear patience of a process that has been running for billions of years and will continue for billions more, to hold the question against. That is enough. It has always been enough. And in the deep quiet of this night, in this room, in this body, in the particular configuration of matter and awareness that is you. It is, if you allow it to be, everything. There is a phenomenon in physics called entanglement, a condition in which two particles, once brought into contact, maintain a correlation that persists across any distance. Measure one particle, and the state of its partner is instantly determined, no matter how far apart they have traveled. Einstein was deeply uncomfortable with this. He called it spooky action at a distance, and spent years trying to find a way to explain it away. But it has been experimentally confirmed, repeatedly and rigorously, beyond any reasonable doubt. It is real. Two things that were once together carry across any separation the record of their connection. The atoms in your body were once, in the most literal sense, part of stars. They were synthesized in the cores of suns that burned for billions of years before they exploded and scattered their substance through the galaxy. Those atoms are carrying, at the level of their fundamental nature, the record of where they have been, the record of the stellar furnaces that forged them, the record of the interstellar clouds that dispersed them, the record of the long gravitational processes that gathered them into a planet, and the even longer biological processes that organized them into a creature capable of asking where it came from. You are, in the most precise sense available to physics, the light from dead stars. And the question you carry, the one that brings you here, to this meditation, to this journey through the mathematics of the cosmos and the whispers of ancient story. That question is the stars speaking. through the particular medium of your nervous system. The language they have been trying to speak since before there was anyone on this world to hear it. The universe has been reaching toward you for 13 billion years. Through the formation of galaxies and the birth and death of stars and the slow assembly of rocky planets and the patient experiment of biological evolution and the extraordinary accident of consciousness. All of it, every step, carrying forward the record of what it was and moving in its impersonal and magnificent way toward the moment that is this one. A conscious creature, lying in the dark, feeling the question of its own aloneness as something simultaneously vast and intimate, simultaneously the largest question the cosmos contains, and the most personal thing you know. That is not indifference. What the universe has done, what it is still doing right now, in the cells of your body carrying their ancient work through the hours of your sleep, is more than indifference. It is more than mechanism. It is, if you allow it to be, something that the word love does not entirely capture, but points toward. A signal sent from a civilization 100 light years away. A distance so small by astronomical standards that it represents less than 1/10,000th of the diameter of the Milky Way galaxy, takes 100 years to reach us. A signal sent in response to a message we transmitted today will not return to Earth for 200 years. A signal from the nearest star system, Alpha Centauri, 4.2 light years away, takes 4 years to arrive. The speed of light is not a bureaucratic limitation. It is a fundamental feature of the universe, built into the structure of space-time in a way that no technology, however advanced, is expected to circumvent. It means that any conversation between civilizations separated by stellar distances is not a conversation in any sense that our social evolution prepared us for. It is something closer to the exchange of letters between correspondents who know they will not live to read the reply. Letters written with the full awareness that the person who receives them will be separated from the person who sent them, not by miles, but by generations. The Arecibo message of 1974 was aimed at the globular cluster Messier 13, 25,000 light years away. If a civilization there received it, the earliest any response could reach Earth is 50,000 years from now. Every human civilization that has ever existed, end to end from the first cities to the present, would fit several times within that interval. The people who might receive our answer will not be us. They will be strangers to us in every meaningful sense, speaking languages that have not yet been invented, shaped by events that have not yet occurred. And yet we sent the message. And if a reply comes in 50,000 years, or 10,000, or 100,000, we will have been part of a conversation that is, by its nature, larger than any individual life, any culture, any civilization. A conversation conducted across the very limits of the possible. A conversation that requires not just the transmission of information, but the transmission of intention. The willingness of a civilization to say, to whatever might be listening, that the question matters enough to ask, even without any reasonable expectation of response. This is the patience the universe seems to require of us. Not the patience of waiting for something specific, but the patience of remaining open to a time scale that dwarfs everything we know about time. The patience of a species that can understand its own smallness, can calculate its own insignificance against the backdrop of galactic history, and choose, in full awareness of that insignificance, to participate anyway, to send the message, to keep the telescope pointed at the sky, to press the music into gold. There is a concept in ecology called the ghost of predators past, the observation that prey animals in regions where large predators have been absent for centuries still carry, in their behavioral repertoire, the responses that evolved for a threat that no longer exists. The pronghorn antelope of North America is the most striking example. The pronghorn can run at speeds of nearly 90 kilometers per hour, faster than any predator currently alive on the North American continent, faster than any predator alive there for the past 12,000 years. It runs at the speed of the cheetah-like cats and lion-like carnivores that went extinct at the end of the last ice age. It is outrunning an absence. It is responding at a cellular and behavioral level to a threat that exists only in the deep memory of its genome. The pronghorn's speed is not a malfunction. It is a record, an archive maintained by the faithful machinery of genetics through 12,000 years of changed conditions of a world that was. We are the pronghorn of consciousness. We are built for a universe that, in our evolutionary history, may have been more full of contact, more full of the kind of social and ecological complexity that required and rewarded the particular kind of attention, and reaching toward that, we now turn toward the sky. The curiosity that drives SETI, the wonder that builds observatories, the love that presses music into gold and launches it into the dark. These are capacities built over millions of years of evolutionary pressure for a world of connection, of communication, of the ongoing negotiation between self and other, that defines the life of a social animal embedded in a rich ecosystem. We turn these capacities toward the cosmos, not because the cosmos has given us signals that it is ready to receive them, but because the capacities exist and the cosmos is there, and the particular quality of the human mind cannot encounter the scale of the universe without automatically reaching toward it. We are running at the speed of the old world, in a universe whose full population we have not yet mapped. And the running, the reaching toward. This is not a mistake. It is a form of fidelity. It is the body's refusal to accept that the world it was built for is entirely gone. In a desert in southeastern Algeria, on the walls of a sandstone plateau that rises 500 meters above one of the most forbidding terrains on Earth, there are paintings. More than 15,000 of them, rendered in ochre and manganese and chalk on cliff faces that have been sheltered from the worst of the weather for 10,000 years. They show a world that no longer exists. Elephants and giraffes and hippopotamuses, rivers and lakes and grasslands. People swimming in water that has not flowed here for 5,000 years. The people who painted those walls are long gone. The world they painted is long gone. What remains is the record. The evidence that something was here, that something lived and looked and found the world worth recording. 10,000 years of silence. And then, a French Foreign Legion officer on patrol in the 1930s comes around a bend in the sandstone and stops, stunned, before a painted giraffe in a landscape that contains no giraffes. And the silence is, for a moment, broken. This is what we do. When the universe falls silent around us, we paint the walls. We send the golden records. We build the radio telescopes and turn them toward the stars and listen. Year after year, in the patient faith that the silence is not the last word. We write the equations and tell the stories and lie awake in the small hours holding the question with the quality of attention it deserves. The attention that is, in the end, a form of love. An insistence on taking the universe seriously. A refusal to let the scale of the unknown diminish the value of the known. The known is this. You exist. The known is this. The universe arranged itself over an incomprehensible span of time and space in such a way as to produce you, to produce this moment, this question, this quality of wondering in the dark. The known is this. The silence that surrounds us is not emptiness. It is the silence before music. It is the silence of a universe that is still becoming. still building towards something it has not yet reached, that is doing so right now, in this room, in the particular configuration of matter and mystery that is you, alive and awake and listening. We do not know if anyone is out there. We do not know if the wow signal was a message or a magnetar. We do not know whether the great filter is behind us or ahead of us, whether the dark forest is the truth of the cosmos or a story we tell in the absence of better information. We do not know what the golden records will find, or if they will find anything. In the billions of years they will travel through the cold between stars. What we know is that we made them. What we know is that we sent them. What we know is that the reaching toward quality of the best kind of human wonder, the quality that built the radio telescopes and wrote the Drake equation and pressed Carl Sagan's message into gold, is not a symptom of loneliness. It is a form of love. It is the universe loving itself through the particular medium of the species it produced on this blue-white world, in this ordinary spiral arm, in this unremarkable region of an unremarkable galaxy. And love, in any language, in any medium, across any distance. Love does not require an answer to be real. Let the questions settle now, not away from you. Let them settle into you, the way warmth settles into a body lying in a patch of afternoon sun, finding its way into the deepest places, not by effort, but by being present long enough for the warmth to do what warmth does. The universe is 13.8 billion years old. The question that Fermi asked over a plate of food in a New Mexico desert is, on that time scale, brand new. A question that could only arise in a consciousness sophisticated enough to understand its own improbability, late enough in the universe's history for the stars to have had time to produce the chemistry that makes consciousness possible. We are at the very beginning of the questioning. The telescopes are just opening their eyes. The mathematics is just beginning to speak. And meanwhile, in the interstellar dark, two spacecraft move through the cold between stars, carrying their golden records toward a future that none of the people who built them will ever see. Voyager 1 is beyond the solar system now, in the true interstellar medium, in the space between stars that is not empty, but filled with the thin, cold, ancient gas and radiation of the galaxy itself. It still sends back signals. The engineers who receive those signals, faint as a whisper across 23 billion kilometers, say that there is something extraordinary about knowing that a thing you built is out there, alone in the dark, still functioning, still carrying its message through the void. The golden record contains, among many other things, the sound of a human kiss. Someone pressed their lips together and made that small, warm, extraordinarily particular sound. And a microphone captured it, and the engineers encoded it, and it was pressed into gold and bolted to a machine and launched into permanent night. That sound is now in interstellar space. It will be there long after the civilization that produced it is gone. Long after the language in which its context was explained has ceased to be spoken. Long after the earth itself has been swallowed by the sun. The sound of a human kiss traveling through the dark between stars. There is nothing in the science of the Drake equation or the logic of the great filter that requires us to feel anything in particular about this fact. But I find, and perhaps you find, that it is impossible to hold this image without feeling something. Something that is not precisely sadness, and not precisely joy, and not precisely wonder, but carries something of all three. Something that arrives when the mind has been still long enough for the heart to speak. Something that sounds, when it arrives, like recognition. We are this kind of creature. We are the kind that sends kisses into the dark on the chance that something somewhere, might hear them. The kind that presses music into gold and launches it beyond the furthest boundaries of the solar system with no expectation of return. The kind that builds radio telescopes and listens year after year, decade after decade, for a signal that may never come, and keeps listening anyway. Because the alternative is to treat the silence as final, and that is something our nature will not permit. We are the creatures who refuse to believe the question has no answer. And that refusal, that beautiful, stubborn, mathematically unjustifiable refusal, is the most extraordinary thing about us. More extraordinary than our technology. More extraordinary than our science. More extraordinary than the particular arrangement of neurons that makes us capable of asking where we came from and where we are going, and whether anyone else, in the vast dark, is asking the same thing. You are the latest expression of what they were, what we have always been. The atoms that compose you have been cycling through the universe for billions of years, through stars and nebulae, and the cold dark between galaxies, and the warm chemical complexity of early Earth, and the long experiment of biological evolution, and the specific improbable sequence of events that produced, first, the species, and then the civilization, and then the moment in history that is yours. You carry, in the precise configuration of your body, and your nervous system, and your capacity for wonder, the entire record of everything that had to happen for you to be here. You are, in the most literal sense, the universe's answer to its own question. You are the place where the mathematics of the cosmos and the longing of the heart meet, where the 400 billion stars of the Milky Way and the question that Fermi asked over lunch, and the 72 seconds of the wow signal, and the golden record hurtling through interstellar space all converge. Right now, in this room, in this body, in this moment of awareness suspended between waking and sleep. The stars have not answered, but you are made of them. And somewhere in the physics that arranged your atoms into something capable of asking whether it is alone, there is, if you allow yourself to feel it here in the dark. With the day released and the body at rest and the mind finally quiet enough to hear it. Something that is not silence. Something that is, if you turn it the right way in the light of your attention, the sound of a universe that knows you are here, that knows you are here and finds it sufficient. Your body knows how to sleep. It has been doing this since long before you were born to supervise it. The cells maintaining their ancient work, the heart keeping its count, the breath continuing in its slow tide through the hours when you are not watching. The universe will be there in the morning, as large and as silent and as full of its unanswered questions as it is right now. The Voyager probes will continue their journey. The radio telescopes will keep listening. The stars will continue their long, patient shining across distances so vast they make the word distance feel like an approximation. And you will sleep, and you will dream. And somewhere in the dreaming, the question and the silence and the longing and the wonder will dissolve into each other. The way all things dissolve at sufficient depth into the thing they always were. Which is this: the universe, alive and conscious and reaching toward itself, asking whether it is loved, and answering in the only way available to it. Yes. Yes. Always yes. Sleep now. Let the stars keep their vigil, as they have always kept it, shining with patient mathematical reliability across distances too vast for human language to contain, into a dark that is not empty but full, not silent but waiting, not cold but carrying, in every photon of ancient light. The warmth of what made it, and the wonder of what received it, and the particular quality of love that has no name in any language, but that you know in the oldest and deepest part of what you are, when you feel it. Sleep well. The universe is dreaming of itself, and you are the dream. Good night.